Okay. Good to go?
Yeah.
You sound so unsure.
I don't know. I'm never ready. I just do it. I just speak.
Hello and welcome to Literary Canon Ball. Literary Canon Ball is a podcast for anyone who wants a fun and feisty conversation about books. Inspired by the Stell account, which surveys print, online and broadcast book reviews annually and consistently reveals a bias against female identifying writers, we're aiming to expand the bookish conversation, reading books by women from around the world. I'm Kirby Fenwick and I'm joined by...
Neve Marnie, student by day, writer, editor by night and reader by nature.
Good, very good. And
B, and I just found out, I didn't tell you before, but today I found out I'm 60% Hufflepuff.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And 40%...
40% what?
Ravenclaw.
Oh.
I like how you pause. You're like, Slytherin, interesting. But this was like a Cambridge University qualified study survey thing. In line with Time magazine, and you can get a figure out exactly what percentage of each house you are, and I am 0.1% Slytherin. So.
Okay, we're going to have to link to that in the show notes so everyone can do this Cambridge University Time magazine authorised Harry Potter quiz and find out what percentage they are.
And there's more research to this personality test than there is in Myers-Briggs, which told me I've got the personality of Margaret Thatcher and Steve Jobs, so... I'm feeling better as a Hufflepuff than...
Wait,
really?
do you remember which acronym you are in Myers-Briggs?
It was
Is that
something
like
with zero
like
and...
INT?
Yeah,
I'm
INF.
Z, whatever,
So
I don't know.
INFP.
It said basically I have no emotion and I'm just logic.
Oh, savage.
Okay.
But then I also related to it. But I'm a Hufflepuff. Anyway, I'm not Margaret Thatcher.
Okay. So, to our book for episode 5. First published in Mexico in 2010 before being translated into English in 2013, Sidewalks is a collection of essays by Valeria Luiselli that explores the places, both real and imagined, that shape our lives. From a cemetery in Venice to a map library in the National Metrological Service building in Mexico to our bookshelves, this collection is philosophical and funny, perceptive and unaffected, a meandering collection of words that take you to some surprising places. And what did we think?
Where did it take you, Neve?
Many a place. I think how she thinks about spaces and how she writes spaces in both a physical and a more abstract sense was so complex and so well done. Like there's the spaces she talks about the spaces that are left, and I can't remember the actual word for it, but if I flicked through it, I probably would.
Is that Relingos?
The Relingos, which was beautiful and had like that beautiful ending at the end with the writing and the making of Relingos, and you're like, oh, so gorgeous. Conclusions.
And what
good ending gets me every time.
And what does that word mean to you or to the author, just for non-Spanish speaking people?
Considering I just read this 15 minutes ago, I should be up on it.
It's kind of like the leftover spaces, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like when you do when a city's being constructed or a new road's being built or something like that, it's like those little slivers of land that aren't planned for and are just kind of left over.
The unclaimed spaces.
Yeah.
I think is how she terms it.
Which is interesting where, because given that this is a collection of essays, one kind of building onto the next, I didn't feel like there were standalone pieces, but there were kind of spaces where it ends abruptly that I kind of almost felt like she built in the Relingos into this collection of essays. Deliberately, and she kind of makes the allusion to, say, sidewalks and cities like New York and places like that, where sidewalks are the chalkboards of the city.
Yeah.
Of kind of where there are outlines of bodies that have people who have been killed, and that's in Mexico City as well. But I kind of really liked that she talks about the architecture of the city, but then embeds that into the essay collection as well. Like, it was so meta wonderful.
Oh yeah, like for one thing, just straight up, having an essay as like basically one paragraph is ballsy, and I admired it, and it worked really well.
Great essay.
Yeah.
What a thud.
So much of this, for me, so much of this is quite ballsy in a way. Like, she's not afraid to do it the way she wants to do it.
Oh, definitely.
Because some of it is a little bit disconnected, but it works. Like, it doesn't matter.
Disconnected
There's
how?
a build.
Yeah, some of the transitions are not smooth, and the way she moves back and forwards are not necessarily beautifully smooth and finished and sparklingly pretty, but it doesn't matter because there is something about her, the style, the way that she writes, the way that she uses language. She reminds me a lot of Rebecca Solnit, and I'm a big fan of Rebecca Solnit, and that sort of meandering essay that just takes you on this journey and you have no idea where you're going from the first sentence, and it's magic. It's absolutely magic. And I feel like Sidewalks is like that. Like, that's how she writes. You start this essay and you're not really sure where you're going to end up, but it's perfect. It's just perfect.
Felt that there is a beautiful meandering sense to her work of this book, but it didn't feel like there was a single wasted word, or there wasn't a tangential place to a dead end. It always felt like she was putting things in for a reason with a lot of thought, and even if it didn't make sense necessarily in one essay, the payoff would be several essays later where you're like, I needed this information to understand this section of your life or this part of the city or this thesis. I don't think this book could work as excerpts in like a magazine or something like that. It's very much a single piece, a body of work that works so well.
Yeah, it almost
working together.
Yeah, it's almost working like each essay is like a sort of self-contained chapter, but then so there's like the story and the arc of that, but then there's the interconnected links that, I mean, you've got the first essay connecting to the last, and she returns to sort of this, the same ideas of like liminal spaces and creating spaces and like how like the public versus the private, like all of those,
and how we respond to those spaces and
all those sort of run through, and then there are certain elements and turns of phrase that will crop up throughout the essays. So yeah, I think it definitely works. I don't think this is one you dip in and out of. It's one you read.
Yeah, I feel like you need to read it. Like, you just need to be sort of I agree. You can't just sort of read one essay and then go away and come back. It needs, I felt like I needed to focus on it, and it needed to be what I was reading at that. It only took a few days to read. It's quite short, really, but yeah, you need to invest in it and like dive right into it and immerse yourself in it, really. And why wouldn't you want to? It's great.
I kind of found when I was reading it, I made the conscious effort within the first 5 pages, like, okay, this is the first time I'm reading this. Like, I knew that this is something
you come back to
desperately wanted to return to, because you know when a writer is so good that you're just stopped immediately with sentence after sentence because they're such beautifully constructed phrases, and she's so good at distilling things into like
just perfect language
that I did so few sticky tabs in this because I'm like, I'm gonna come back to this again and again, and I was even like, usually I mark up books with a pen and pencil like quite like vigorously because I'm like, oh, I'll like plot my way back into this one section of a book. But I kind of feel like what you're saying, Neve, that it's such a lovely thing to read start to finish, to get things from that I knew that
you'd come back to it.
Yeah, and I'm excited to come back to it.
I did mark it up. Like, mine's got a lot of sticky notes and I've taken to it with a pencil. But I feel like this will be one of those pieces, one of those books, like much of Rebecca Solnit, like A Field Guide to Getting Lost by Rebecca Solnit, that I will come back to again and again because there is something about it that just, I just feel so connected to on so many levels, and I just feel like I know I was watching you, Neve, finishing this book before we started recording, and you were sort of like, you know, nodding and like making like sort of like little gasp noises, and I'm like, that was me when I was reading this book, because you get to some parts and you're just like, oh my God. And I want to read one to you. That I
You've got a great reading face, by the way. Like, it's very engaged. Yeah,
it's great. We could do like a visual, like just a documentary on your reading face. But anyway, I want to read this section to you because it reminded me of a section that from A Field Guide to Getting Lost, which is by Rebecca Solnit, who I've mentioned 8,000 times already. But it's a kind of beautiful way to think about space. So I just want to read this for you. Spaces survive the passage of time in the same way a person survives his death, in the close alliance between the memory and the imagination that others forge around it. They exist as long as we keep thinking of them, imagining in them, as long as we remember them, remember ourselves there, and above all, as long as we remember what we imagined in them. I just find that's just so beautiful, because it's the spaces are more than just their physicality. They are what you remember them, your experiences from being there. They become bigger and more important and more valuable than just, you know, like if you think of a park that has been, you know, it's more than just the trees and the grass and the flowers and the birds flying around. It becomes something more significant because of the memories that you have there and the people that you spent time with there, or the experiences that you had while you were there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also it's a human impulse to fill up the space, to imagine and project what you want into. Like, so there's the park of, like, at night there's like the projection of this sort of fearfulness, and then during the daytime there's a beautiful like levity. And then also in Blocks of Land, she talks about having the two, one architect envisioning a deaf theatre in this space, and there was a completely different interpretation of the same space and the beauty of that and how individual that is. But I just wanted to, it's just so delightful in a meta way, how we're all sort of, and myself included, we're all really wanting to come back to this book and do another really deep reading, because she sort of talks about that within one of her essays.
She does, yeah.
And there's this line, I'm just like, just fuck me up, honestly. And
rock and roll.
Yeah, so she's talking about coming back and reading a book that she read as a teenager, and then she's ends up distilling into, but rereading is not like remembering, it's more like rewriting ourselves, the subtle alchemy of reinventing our pasts through twice underscored words written by others. And that whole idea of molding yourself and sort of rewriting yourself through books and through what you've seen is like beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Just to paint a visual image there, as Neve was reading that out, Kirby and I were like nodding our heads
so going, vigorously.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I really love how she plays with the role of the writer and reading in the sort of architecture of a city and a place. So her exploration of space is not just the physical, but the metaphysical, the sort of thoughts and the brain and kind of cerebral spaces that we create, and how that kind of ties in with emotions. And I really like what I enjoy thoroughly about these essays, because there's the whole genre of the walking writer, and they're walking around pointing things out.
What do they call the flaneur? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Flaneur. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know French.
The people who walk around
writing
stuff. And that's like been done a lot, but whereas she comes at it with a sense of wit that is so fresh and new, and to me, she does reference a lot of people, but it's never in a heavy-handed way. It's always with intention, and it's not in kind of a pompous, like, shut the fuck up. Wait, it's more like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so
It's not like, look how well
smooth.
read I am.
It's an appreciation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I kind of started to compile a bit of a list of people I wanted to chase up to read more about, but I really liked how she added this in towards the end of it, and it's almost poking fun at herself and the genre. And I feel like we're all doing like ready things today. So
I love it.
What's beautiful?
she's just basically talking about the role of a writer and how she feels writing is. And she says, I know that at times I feel most excited about what I'm writing are when I should be the most suspicious, because more often than not, I'm repeating something I either said or read elsewhere, something which has been lingering in my mind for a while. I think that's so great. Like, we're all people who write, we're writers, and often when I'm writing, I'm like, is this like copying someone else? I'm not entirely sure. Like, where did these ideas
But then is any
come
real
from?
writing, is any writing really original?
Well,
Because
yeah.
you're all, I mean, you're informed by, you know, like that piece that you were quoting, Neve, about how, you know, rereading is like rewriting, you know,
Yeah,
that's sort of like remembering yourself through what you read. Well, then surely everything we write is informed by what we read. How can it not be?
Which is
Exactly.
kind of, she circles around to this in this great kind of like, oh my goodness, she's so clever. She kind of writes a little bit more about that and then concludes, in some way, I guess, writing is making space for reading. And that just kind of elevates the reader
isn't
yet
that great?
again. So
Yes.
as a reader, I was like, oh, I'm chuffed.
But then as a writer, the reader should be that's the person we should be focused on, really, isn't it?
But it's a dual relationship. Like, the reader is the writer is a reader. And
Yes.
you can't divorce the fact
But the reader is not necessarily a writer, is that what you think?
Well, not necessarily. So not all readers are writers, but all writers at some level of engagement are readers. And, you know, the kind of that sort of dance between the two of, you've read these things, you're creating things, you're exploring spaces and concepts and ideas, and she's really well read, and I love that she's not pretentious about it.
Oh, yeah.
But like you were saying, you never feel like you're being, you know, smacked over the head with her reading list.
Absolutely.
It feels quite, yeah, it's just really well done. It's just really well done.
Yeah, and also this book is so well placed in terms of meta discussions, because there's yet another essay that talks about language and the failures of language, and it's like, I'm reading this as an English translation of Spanish, and so there are words where I'm like, you're like, so much of your point is hinged on my interpretation of these like very specific phrases, and how much of that has been altered by the translation. And so like there's that weird meta, like,
that's such a great essay.
oh yeah, it's gorgeous. Because it's the talking about that the one word that yet again I cannot remember, but it's sort of about it's kind of vaguely sort of means like melancholy and like homesickness, and she's sort of writing around the word and trying to define it, but also sort of make meaning of it, and tries to come at it from several different angles, and really like all these different other ideas crop up, and it's just really gorgeous. Like,
yeah, I've just found the word. I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, I know, because I'm one of those horrible people that only speaks English. Saudade. Saudade.
Yeah.
I'm saying that with my terrible
Sorry.
Anglo mind.
I know.
But there is something that she says about language and about that word. When we have only a partial knowledge of a language, the imagination fills in the sense of a word, a phrase, or a paragraph, like those drawing books where the pages are covered with dots that as children we had to join with a crayon to reveal the complete image. I just feel like I need to lie down after I read that, because it's kind of like...
I
isn't it
literally
gorgeous?
swooned multiple times during this book. I was on several trams and I was literally like floating around the place. I got so much utter joy reading this book and
That is
even
the
just hearing
perfect
you
word.
guys
Oh, joy.
read it aloud.
Oh,
Oh,
joy.
definitely. And
Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
I mean, just for that, if you've ever had to like learn a language or anything, and you remember those early days of reading, in a new language, that's like I related to that because she's talking about very specific, times where she would her mind would translate like trains as in like trains, but in French it's sort of I think it's like a conjunction or preposition, and then that loss of meaning where she sort of mourns the fact that there was this like beautiful poetic nature of reading it as trains, but then the knowledge coming later and knowing what it actually means, and then just like the layers of that, and I was like, oh.
I know, and it makes it so meta, like you were saying, because this is obviously a book that's been translated.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's like a whole nother level to that again, because and the woman who translated it, her name is, let me just find her name here.
It is
Christina
McSweeney.
Christina McSweeney, and there's a lovely interview with her which we'll post in the show notes as well. So yeah, it adds that whole nother level of complexity because she's writing about language and that the space is in language, and then this has been translated. But she's an English speaker and an English writer, so it's but she didn't do the translation herself.
I love her reason. She's like, yeah, no, it's just boring. I don't want to do that. Like, cut and dry, whatever. Well, outsource that. That's fine.
Oh, well, you have to write it once. Do you really want to write it again?
But I also wonder whether that is something you'd be able to do effectively, because as the writer of the work, there is a connection there that can never be severed, and there is, as the writer, you often have such a deeper understanding of what you were trying to say or what you were trying to do. Does that make translation nearly impossible? Because if you're coming at it as just a translator, my God, they're gods. But if you're coming at it as a translator, you don't have any of that, perhaps you don't have any of that emotional investment and all the rest of it into the work, and so you can just translate the work.
Yeah, but then at the same time,
I don't think...
is there a pure idea of having an author translate it because they
know exactly what they wanted to say?
Whereas with a translator, there's always that doubt when you're reading translated work. No matter how beautifully translated as
there's always a doubt. Yeah.
How effectively because there are some things that can't be translated particularly well across languages, and an author would probably make that judgment call with the deeper knowledge, whereas a translator might have to make that as like a sort of a judgment call or how they've read the work.
It would never be a straight, like, it's not just one word substituting for another word with translation. So there would be infinite numbers of decisions to try and render each description from Spanish to English. And there's so many really kind of... It'd be really interesting to read this in Spanish, so I should go away and just learn Spanish and read it.
You can do that and get back to us. That'd be good.
Yeah.
But there's like...
Take one for the team.
Hi, guys. Olé. But there's so many... I wonder, with books in translation, does it lend itself to having fresh insights to similes and things like that? Because there isn't a single wasted word in this. Every description feels really fresh and resonant and new. There's things like she's kind of looking for a book on the bookshelf, and instead of just saying, I looked for the book on the bookshelf, it was the persistence of a mosquito around a light bulb is how she describes it. And in another section, she describes a gaze or looking as the gaze, which is nothing more than an extension, a hand of the mind takes pleasure in and entertains itself, filling up hollow spaces. I love that as being, your eye is just an extension of your mind. There's so many just wonderfully, so you're saying, like, quirks of English and descriptions in this. I wonder, is it the process of taking translation from one language to another language that just makes translated works so interesting as something to read, regardless of what language it's coming from and into.
Well, and there's that added layer of creativity, because it's not just the creative work itself, it's the creative work of the translator.
Absolutely.
Of trying to convey the metaphor, and that brings a freshness definitely.
Which is, I really love the move towards recognizing translators as
So
writers,
great.
because they are writers.
It's a I agree with you, Neve. It's a creative process.
Yeah.
Like taking a work in one language and translating it into another. There is a huge amount of creativity there because of the choices that you have to make. I mean, remember when we did Human Acts and you know, and the complexity around translating the title and how complex that was and how much work had to go into that, into making that work. And it's the title of the book. Like, I mean, where do you even begin with the text in that in that manner? Oh
yeah. And also, I think having read a huge amount of translated work, but reading enough that I can say, like, this is beautifully, because I've read shitty translated books, and you can tell.
And these guys had a pretty good relationship. Like, having read the interview with Christina, yeah, they have worked together before, and they obviously have a good relationship. And maybe that's half the battle with a translation, because if you can speak with the author and you can have that relationship with them, you're almost working together in a sense.
Yeah, it's like another type of author-editor, but even more so, even more creative. Yeah. I think there's even more creative control, more trust in that.
Yeah, imagine trusting someone to take your work and translate it into another language. I mean, Valeria, like, she speaks English, so and reads English, so she could read this and sign off on it. But what if you didn't?
You're just
like, you're trusting someone to take your work and translate it into a language that you don't know. That's huge.
It's scary. Shit.
Just letting everyone know, I trust you guys. Just translate my work. On that note of ego, would you guys recommend this book to people, and who would you recommend it to?
I would absolutely recommend it. Yeah, I think we've waxed pretty lyrical about it for the last so ever many minutes, but anyone really. I would particularly recommend it to people who are fans of the essay, so anyone who has an appreciation for the likes of Rebecca Solnit or Leslie Jameson, two writers who I'm massive fans of. Anyone who has an appreciation for those type of meandering, wandering, lyrical essays that just take you on these wonderful journeys, you'll thoroughly enjoy this. You'll absolutely enjoy it, and then you'll want to read a whole lot of her work.
Oh yeah. Actually, I'm just thinking about it now. I think I kind of want to say I'd recommend it to writers, but then that kind of implies that the book is quite writerly, which is not necessarily. I feel like that can be a bit of an insult. But I don't know, anyone who really loves language and enjoys language, that's who I think this book is good for.
What about you, Fee?
I agree with that completely, because it is such a romp in words, but like an enjoyable read about words, and it goes deep into linguistics. I definitely would recommend it to people who are just interested in the world, which is quite a broad sort of thing of me basically saying everybody should read this. But it's really, we didn't really kind of touch on it, but it's kind of a little bit travel memoir in places.
Yeah, definitely.
And it goes into her childhood, and it goes into a heck of a lot of themes and topics about the role of people in society and place and space. So it's kind of like a Bowerbird book. Like, if you like finding out random facts and tidbits of information, but presented really nicely, this is a book, and it's great for public transport.
Oh, definitely, because you can just slide into your bag.
Yes, it's quite a thin book, really, isn't it? So you can just pop that in.
You can put it in your back pocket.
You
Do you
really
like the
put it in a
whole
pocket.
Jess from Gilmore Girls thing?
Oh no, because that's,
I liked Jess.
Oh no,
but bending
nothing
the book
against
like
Jess
that,
necessarily,
I'm
but
just not sure about that.
Yeah, that's
Love a
too
book,
much.
bend a book, it's fine.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
Also,
Maybe get wider pockets.
Yeah. Oh, you have to have man's pockets, unfortunately. That's a whole nother discussion.
Yes, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I don't think we mentioned this, but it's actually quite funny in parts as well.
Yeah, she's quite funny.
Oh, she's a
I
wit.
should say I have read what was the one that I read? Faces in the Crowd by the same author, which is a work of fiction, which is probably one of the most brilliant things I've read this year because of its, and I'm going to say it, structure.
We didn't even mention the structure.
I thought several times about structure.
But it was, but that was quite funny too. There was a lot of sort of like quite amusing things. So yeah, a lot of funny stuff in this as well. I agree.
Oh yeah, and then just because we forgot about it, and I feel like it needs to be mentioned because the structure in this is actually quite interesting. I'll just say like they're talking like she talks so much about space, and you can sort of, as you said, Faye, that you can see it within the book. Like she gives you with like there's like subtitles and then like page breaks and
so
she gives
directions in the subtitles. So you're walking through a city with her, and she's telling you left here, right there, and you're going through city blocks.
So you're sort of being taken. I don't know. I don't want to say taken.
But she's given you space as well because
like
of the
space
way
to
it's
reflect.
structured. Yeah, you can read like one piece and you can sort of go, okay, I'm going to think about that for a little while. So there's space for you, the reader,
to absorb.
To absorb and to think.
So she's not sort of dropping so much lyrical prose, which is what I think sometimes can be fall down in
pretty for the sake of pretty.
Yeah, literary, and I say this in with quotes. Literary fiction is that they're just dropping so much like really heavy prose on you, like, oh, I'm drowning.
Give me a functioning sentence, please.
And then with this, you've got space to breathe, which is what I find really refreshing about foreign novels often.
That's a beautiful place to finish, I think. Space to breathe. And it's a thumbs up from all of us. That's nice.
And I have to say, the unofficial drinking game of structure continues. Take a shot.
Okay, so on to recommendations. What have we been reading and watching and listening to that we want to give the 2 thumbs up to? Neve, what you got?
Okay, first off, documentary is called, and I apologize for the slur, but there's no other way of recommending this, called I Am Not Your Negro. The director is Raoul Peck. Came to Melbourne International Film Festival, and I think is still running in Acme, if you want to check it out. So basically, the premise of the documentary is that it's sort of based off the 30 pages of notes written by James Baldwin called Remember This House, which is about 3 of his friends who were murdered. So Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Medgar Evers, so all African American activists. And holy shit, this documentary, wow, it is firing on all cylinders. You've got it's just like a sensory experience because you've got the visuals, you've got Baldwin's work being read by an actor whose name I'm blanking on, and I should have googled before this. And then you've got snippets of interviews with him, and then there's the juxtaposition of the past and the present in race relations in America. It's delves into sort of media representations of African American people, especially there's a section that goes for about 5 or 10 minutes about Sidney Poitier and all of his film roles and sort of deconstructing that. It sort of goes into each activist, so Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Medgar Evers, and Baldwin's relationship with them and their lives, and just oh wow, it's just so powerful and so authentic and raw. It's not comfortable, as many of these sort of this topic isn't, I suppose. But such necessary watching, like by far like one of the best documentaries I've ever watched.
I'm so glad that they've got someone narrating his writing, because his writing just slays. It is so affecting, and it unfortunately hasn't dated in the sense that it's still
relevant,
so pressing and present.
Oh yeah.
Because I read recently, if Black English isn't a language, then tell me what is, and that was a essay he wrote in 1979.
Yeah.
And it's in the New York Times, and Jesus fucking Christ, it is a stellar essay. He's just a brilliant, brilliant man, like in terms of how he can distill an ideology around language and race relations, but then make it universal. And it's so incredible.
Oh, definitely. I mean, his writing is just, oh wow. I'm so glad it's it had sort of a dip, but now it's being sort of revived in like the mainstream culture. My one quibble with this documentary, even though I really did love it and it was really powerful, is that it only very glancingly mentioned his sort of queer identity, and didn't go into the intersections of how that impacted upon his activism in his life, which it very much did. And in his writings, like his novel Giovanni's Room was one of like a really seminal like gay novel. Like I would have appreciated the documentary sort of going into that in an as nuanced way as it went into other topics. But I understand maybe perhaps they wanted to have something that was more focused. But I think also at the same time, with intersectionality, if you're sort of glancing by certain people, then you're sort of cutting them out.
Yeah.
As well. So other than that, I would say highly recommended.
And it's showing at Acme right now.
Showing at Acme. So
excellent. We'll put some links up in the show notes, absolutely.
Yeah, get yourself down. And then my second recommendation is Australia Day by Melanie Cheng. Oh, did I outscoop you?
Uh-oh. That's all right. I just tidied up my recommendation list.
Fee's got 8,000 things on the
list. Yeah, I have two.
So
you have
she's
like
only got 7,999. It's fine. I am so excited to read this book, and I can't wait to hear you talk about it. Go.
Wow, it's so brilliant. Like, sorry. It is published by Text. It is a collection of short stories. The first is called Australia Day, and it sort of follows a Chinese Australian student, and he's sort of going to a white friend's white family for Australia Day. And
I don't want to spoil that story, but my goodness.
Man.
Please don't spoil it, because I haven't read this.
The emotional complexities, and oh man, I loved, this is such a weird aside, but the really specific Australian details that went into the writing of this it was so great to read. Like, for example, there's an exchange where the father says something, and then the daughter replies, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's just been like angry since the Swans lost the grand final."
Last year, you mean?
Yeah. So it's sort
when
of
they lost to the Western Bulldogs.
Oh.
Hey, Kirby, we don't
yeah,
even have to
simmer, Kirby. You've already won that.
It's all Tigers this year, okay? Get on board.
I'm already on board.
Yeah.
Sorry, Neve.
And then the daughter then goes on to say, "Oh yeah, then the main character, he's a North Melbourne fan." Then
he's been sad for a lot of years.
Oh, and then it goes straight into a main character has never watched a game of football in his life.
Yeah, okay.
Both of he and his roommate decided on a team just to say to people, and another roommate said, "Yeah, it's all fine, just choose one as long as it's not Collingwood."
So is this set in Melbourne?
It is.
Yeah.
Because that's a very Melbourne thing, isn't it? You've got a football team.
And I was like, oh, that's so beautifully specific, and we don't often get to see stuff like that.
Yeah.
But just generally, on the collection as a whole, it followed people's narratives who sort of live on the outskirts or who are marginalised in some way in Australian society, and sort of how they have to interact. So there was like a story about a Chinese woman who doesn't speak English and how she interacts with the world. There were quite a few stories from people who were elderly or middle-aged, and that sort of interaction. It was just, and she really hooked you in with the characters, and then there was a beautiful arc, and you felt like, even in the really short, like the shorter stories, you felt that there was a point, there was a growth or a sort of understanding, and there was just it was, I can't even.
I find that so interesting that you felt like there was a growth in all the stories. Sometimes I felt like we were dropped in, which is great because you're set up straight away, but then coming back out, so it felt like the characters were still living on, that they were very fleshed out, but there wasn't a definitive end and a neat wrap up to any of the pieces. Like even the first one that you mentioned with the Chinese student, so he's talking to his mum back home and talking to her, and it kind of just seems like he's longing for this friend that he has and having to hide that, and there's no resolution, but it just added so nicely to that feeling of,
I don't know, I think I don't particularly mind open-ended stories, but I felt that there was maybe growth. I think there was growth in at least some stories, but perhaps what I really responded to is that there was a purpose behind each story.
Yes.
It wasn't, we were dropped in and you felt like you got to know, you felt like you learned something about the character, something very deep and psychological by the end of the story, which made it very rewarding to read, as opposed to, I think sometimes with short stories you get very invested in a character and then you sort of get dropped at the end. Like there's no resolution in terms of plot or with character, but I felt like there was a resolution with character that I really enjoyed in each of the works.
Great summary.
I'm so excited to read that book. I'm so excited to read that book.
Good.
You'll gallop through it.
It's good. And her prose is just sharp. It's gorgeous.
Awesome. Cool.
Very Melbourne as well. Like if you want a very Melbourne book, it's...
Oh yeah, reading it on the train was like, ooh, there's this.
Oh, I totally do that too.
I love that about reading Australian books, is when there's that sense of recognition of, a football team or a location or even something like food, I was like, it's nice.
I could actually figure out that one of the characters lived on my train line. I'm like, hey, I see you.
That's cool.
What's up?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I did that when I first moved to Melbourne. I was like, all right, Helen Garner, I will finally understand what you're talking about. Like in terms of like, because she's so place specific. And I was just like, yes, I know that street. Yes.
Oh, okay, nice. You've got some cool recs in there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool.
All right. Okay. Are we ready for Fee?
Well,
take a deep breath. Get comfortable.
No, I've been like conscious of not. I've thought about all of these, as I always think about my recommendations list. They're not folly.
No,
it's heartfelt. And this is one that actually I know that Neve has seen and has enjoyed. So we're like doing sherry. And I saw the film Big Sick. And
loved it.
I think I saw you the day after I saw it, and I was still on a Big Sick high. Because it is fantastic.
Yeah.
It is it's a true story, and it's great that you're here, Neve, because I can't remember the comedian's name.
And
neither can Neve.
And neither can I, because my memory is terrible. Well, let's just fill in as Kobe hopefully is Googling for us.
Or using Yahoo or Ask Jeeves. We're not tied to one search engine.
I'm definitely using Google.
Yeah.
Don't be used
we're not being plebs in this podcast.
Kamal Najanji, am I pronouncing that correctly?
And he's also in Silicon Valley and a few other things, and he's a writer and comedian, and he's very funny. It's basically a film that he wrote with his now wife, and it's about how he met his wife, and she heckles him when he's doing a stand-up routine, and it goes through the early days of their relationship and when she gets very sick. And it's kind of I'm not going to say classic love story because it's their actual true story where culturally his parents and his family and he himself kind of wants him to end up with a Pakistani woman to marry to then have children and make his parents happy and all the rest of it. But he finds himself falling in love with this woman, and it's only when she is in a coma that he realizes how deep that love is. And I watched it with a group of people, and I was basically weeping quietly, probably loudly in the cinema.
I cried too.
And it's gorgeous, and it's funny.
Oh yeah, it's like so. There's beautiful emotional resonance, but it's very joke heavy. Like there is the calm in the rom-com.
Oh, there's so much calm. It's great calm. To the point that I couldn't figure out if half of it was improvised on the spot because Ray from Everyone Loves Raymond, I don't know his real name.
Isn't it Raymond?
I don't know.
I think it's Raymond.
So bad with researching names. But he's in it, and he is fan-fucking-tastic in this film.
Yeah.
And they just have such great chemistry. Every actor in it, they just seemed really close and on par. And there's moments of quietness in the film where they're just in each other's presence, and it seems very unstructured, as if they've forgotten the cameras there. And I kind of get the impression that they weren't doing take by take by take, that it was more kind of they set up the scene and then just let scenes play through and they acted through it. So it's not a very slick, sharp film. It's a film with a beating heart to it. It kind of feels
most definitely. And also
gorgeous.
It's while you were sleeping, but not as fucking creepy. Like it doesn't have as quite as much of those creeper vibes underneath.
That's good. That's good. The less creeper vibes, the better.
Totally didn't get creeper vibes from it.
Oh god. So and also if you've ever had, like, if there's ever been someone in your family who's had a really serious illness in that day-to-day hospital grind and all of that, the implications of that and the family implications of that, this film dives really deep into that.
It's a whole other world when you get into that situation where you're sort of spending, a certain amount of time with someone that's in hospital and you're kind of there every day. It twists your entire world. Everything seems, it's like Twilight Zone thing, like the whole world.
And they really don't shy away from the monotony of it all, and just the
it's
sheer
so boring
kind of.
It's nothing happens.
Hard yards of all of that. And I found it thoroughly interesting that I knew the outcome of the film before watching it, because you know that the husband and wife write it, so you know at some level elements of the story, yet I was still quite anxious to find out the end of the story.
Oh, definitely. It's like some Shakespeare, mindfuckery that's going on. You are so committed, even though in the back of your mind that, it's going to be fine.
That should have been on the poster. You need to watch films before they get released, because mindfuckery. It's just
Shakespeare mindfuckery.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that.
Totally do my book blurbs, please.
Will do.
I'll aim for that. Now, the next one was a collection of poems by Omar Scar, and it's called These Wild Houses, and it was published at the start of this year. He grew up near where I grew up, so Western Sydney, and I think he lives in Melbourne now, but...
He does. I follow him on Twitter.
Stalkathon.
Shout out.
But he grew up really close to where I grew up, 2 suburbs away in Wetherill Park, and he mentions Bankstown and stuff. And it's really nice reading poems about that area of Sydney because it's quite maligned in the media and still is. It's like an area with a lot of violence and gangs and just sort of different kind of elements going on that are often represented one way nationally, whereas these poems are just like, they're sections that were deeply familiar of the geographical area and also people who live in the area and like experiences. And then it goes, these are very deeply personal poems to him. So it was quite nice reading it as a collection because I've read sections of his work around the place because he's won a swag of awards and he's a great poet.
Yeah.
But this, I highly encourage people to get this as a collection of poems because each poem speaks to the next. And you kind of build up an idea of who he is and where he is in his life and his experiences. And I don't want to kind of just do the whole like, oh, you shouldn't, the poetry shouldn't represent the poet. I think he's making quite deliberate connections between himself and his words. So it's not just reading into it of like every line. He's very present on the page, which is lovely. And I also read Here Come the Dogs by Omar Musa, and I feel like I'm going around town recommending this book to everyone, so apologies to people who have already recommended it too, including you guys, because this book is great. He also won so many awards for this book, so I feel a little bit later coming to it, but basically I'm going to mention the S word, structure. Take a shot. And so he's a hip-hop artist, he's also a poet, and he's a prose writer, and he uses all those elements in this novel, and it doesn't feel jarring at all. It feels like that is the only way this story should have been told, and it's a story of three mates of different cultural backgrounds living in the town. So it's a nameless town in rural Australia, and it goes into their lives in great detail. In some chapters, it's a lyric poem, and there's sections of poems that tie one into the next, and then the next chapter would be prose, and it's interspersed one after the other. And it's such a joy to read. There's a sense of rhythm and pace to this novel, and his turn of phrase is just slices through everything. It's a really fantastic read, and the narrative itself holds up really well. So it's not a book about being showy for the sake of a show. It's just it's a stellar book, and there's also heaps of hip-hop references in there, so it's always fun to have like a bit of a soundtrack on. You can have some pegs and listen.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And just kind
get
of
some song recs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I also, this is going to seem like such a Slytherin move. I was like, oh, it's one recommendation, but really it's two. So I was going to recommend Future Feminism, which is Anthony from Anthony and the Johnsons did it a few years ago. I should have looked up when it was released. I think it was 2010 maybe. It's about a 7-minute track where basically she speaks about future feminism and the future that she wants to create as a feminist, and how she's a transgendered person, how she comes to feminism as a transgendered person, and how that sexuality and gender are sort of this play with the world itself, so Mother Earth, and she goes off onto all these tangents within a 7-minute period of who we are as humans, our responsibility as humans and to the earth, and how that's changed over a period of time. And the reason why I listened to this again, because I'm a long-time fan of Anthony and the Johnsons, is because, and this is the Slytherin move, because it's a sneaky second recommendation wrapped up in one, is because I've just finished a collection of essays called Things That Helped by Jessica Friedman. And it's she's an Australian author. She's originally from Melbourne as well, but she's living in Canberra now. And this is a collection of essays of many different parts and things. And it kind of uses, it's about her journey of postpartum depression. And she's kind of exploring her way through that as a human who happens to be a mother and a writer and someone who needs to earn money and someone who's a functioning member of the community. So she comes at depression in a number of different ways, and she mentions Anthony and the Johnsons in this, and she goes into a lot of detail of what that band's music means to her. And when I was reading it, I was like, somebody has put into words how I feel about this music, because I've been listening to them for so many years, and it's really lovely when somebody describes your feelings for you because you felt them, but then they can distill them in such a familiar, profound way. And it was really special because Anthony and the Johnsons are just such an important band in terms of her voice is just like a tall glass of cool water on a hot day. It hits the spot and it's gorgeous. So I recommend the music from the band, the book, Things That Helped, and specifically Future Feminism, which is a speech within one of their performances. So that's like a
3-part recommendation.
I know, but it's only 1 dot point. So
oh my gosh,
that is yeah. Sorry, guys.
Super impressive, but very cool. I've heard lots of really wonderful things about that book, so I'm really excited. That's on my list to read, so I'm really excited to get stuck into that.
Jump into it.
Awesome. Okay, I only have a couple of recs this month, and no books, but a podcast and a TV series. So the first podcast is it's called Making Oprah. Yeah, so cool. From so that's from Jen White. So it's connected to WBEZ Chicago and NPR. You can find that on all your podcast listening apps, programs, whatever. Anyway, so it's about Oprah Winfrey. It's about the making of Oprah Winfrey. So it's like a 3-part podcast, and there's a few extra episodes as well, which sort of talks about where she came from and how she got to be like the biggest talk show host in America, if not the world.
Oh, definitely the world.
Yeah, it's massive. So it's really great. Like they actually talk to Oprah, which is fantastic, and they talk to a lot of her like TV producers and staffers, and it's really wonderful. There's actually an extra episode about her hair where they talk with her stylist, which is a really lovely extra episode. But yeah, so I highly recommend that.
Like when she does the short hair versus the bob.
Just like all the different hairstyles that they did, and like, you know, her sort of that transition from being really styled to having more natural black hair.
The country look as well. Oh, she totally changed her style in clothes. God, I love Oprah.
Well, you would love this. You would love this podcast. So, I mean, my memories of Oprah are like coming home from school and like watching the Oprah Winfrey Show, or like having a sick day. You know, you have a day off, and you used to watch that whole series of, they'd be like Judge Judy and Dr. Phil and like Oprah and like
Fresh Prince.
I watched so much Oprah when I was growing up. And I'm sure, like, you know, I mean, most of it was not aimed at me whatsoever as some
we absorbed
teenager.
It though. Like, our emotional
Victoria.
Resilience is so high because of Oprah.
But yeah, so I definitely recommend giving that a listen. It was really interesting. It was really interesting. They talk about that episode where they gave all the cars away, you know, when everybody in the audience got a car. So they talk about that and like the actual like logistics of putting that together. Like they had the keys in these boxes, but then they like shook the boxes, and it's like, well, everyone's going to shake their box and they're going to hear a key. Like you need to put something in the box so that they can't hear. Like if they shake the box, there's no sound. Like it's just like the most amazing things that you just wouldn't even think about. And they're putting together this TV show where they give away like 270 cars or something. Anyway,
which I love. Did they go into nightmare? Those people who got the cars desperately needed the cars.
Yeah, they talk about that, about how they found the people in that audience, like asking all these like really interesting and specific questions, but trying not to be really obvious about it, to try and find people. And overwhelmingly the people in the audience needed a car.
Yeah.
And they got a car.
Because I feel like when episodes talked about now, people are just like, oh, Oprah just gave away shit, like whatever. But she actually changed people's lives for the better.
There's also an interesting aside from that, which they talk about in the podcast, is that there was some people that were like really angry because they had to pay some sort of tax or something because they were getting this brand new car. I'm not sure how it works in the US or something, but Oprah, I think, had paid for like the registration insurance, but there was some sort of gift tax that they had to pay, and they could either take the car and pay that, or they would just get cash, like the equivalent value in cash.
Right, yeah.
I'm not sure in the specifics exactly, but there was a bit of blowback after that episode aired and all those people got cars. People were like, what? You know, we get this car and then we have to pay this money, and it's like, yeah, but you got the car.
You don't have to pay
You got
for
a
the
car.
car.
Like, anyway, so that was really interesting to kind of get that background on that, like, a huge episode that is, I mean, everybody knows about. But they also talk about other things about, you know, the political interviews and having George Bush on and having Barack Obama on and, you know, all the sorts of different things around that. And yeah, so really interesting. Definitely recommend that.
Yeah, also
What a woman.
Side note recommendation, if you haven't watched the interview that with Oprah and Michelle Obama, do it.
Really good.
Yeah, like it's when they're sort of leaving the White House. It runs for about 40 minutes, but like...
Is that on YouTube, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll find that and pop that in the show notes. Excellent. My other recommendation is a TV series which is like over 20 years old. But I have recently discovered all the episodes on YouTube, and it's a TV series that has been in my mind for forever. But anybody that I talk to about it, they never sort of know what I'm talking about. It's called The Extraordinary, and it screened in the early 90s, like 93 to 96. And it was just this like hour-long TV show about like the paranormal and like unexplained things and, you know, just like all this sort of creepy, weird stuff. And it was hosted by Warwick Moss, who has the most amazing voice for like creepy, weird things, because it's,
Is that a compliment?
Anyway, yes, it's definitely a compliment.
Smooth like butter, so
yes,
creepy.
so good. But anyway, I've found all the episodes on YouTube. They have been uploaded by the Australian UFO Action Group, which is a thing.
Cool.
And so
Are
they've
you
got
a card-carrying member now?
I'm not, but I might be soon. Anyway, there's like 3 series, and there's like nearly 50 episodes or something, and they're all up on YouTube. And if you're into like, you know, if you listen to podcasts like Lore and Unexplained, and you like those sort of like, you know, sort of creepy, I'm not really sure what's going on here, I might be a little bit scared kind of things, I definitely recommend jumping on YouTube and looking up The Extraordinary and watching a few eps. And the beautiful thing about it is it's early 90s, it's so dated, the fashion, the hairstyles.
Oh.
But it's just, I mean, it's hilariously fun just to watch for that alone. And then, of course, you get the creepy stories as well. Yeah.
Did you ever watch the TV show Roswell?
No.
Oh my goodness, I was so obsessed with that TV show. And they're aliens living in Roswell, but they're like high school students. Except they all look so old. They're gorgeous. They're like so fucking old to be high school students.
They're like 30 and they're playing a 16-year-old.
Oh yeah. I just loved all of them. But there one takeaway like alien thing. They were all obsessed with Tabasco sauce. Like it was like so delicious and needy for them, so they would just
drink it,
chug it down. It was like
so
given
are you saying that's how you spot an alien? Like if they're a real big fan of Tabasco sauce and they like drink it, then they're obviously an alien. That is a good tip.
Well, that show got canned early, and
because the aliens were onto them.
Well, fans loved it so much that they sent crates of Tabasco sauce to NBS or whoever created the show. Crates and crates and crates. That it came back for another 2 seasons.
That is so funny.
Tabasco sauce for the win.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that cost me a lot of money getting all the Tabasco sauce to America.
Yeah, I bet it did.
International shipping's a bitch.
Oof.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for listening to Literary Canon Ball. I think that's about all we've got for this episode. We hope you'll tune in again next month when we'll be talking about Pythagoras. Is that how you pronounce it?
Oh no.
Pythagoras.
Pythagoras, thank you.
Pythagoras' Trousers, God, Physics and the Gender War by Margaret Worthing. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly as well. Anyway, that's going to be an exciting one. I'm looking forward to that. That should be an interesting discussion. In the meantime, if you want to continue the conversation or you just want to be digital friends, you can follow us on Twitter at Lit Canon Ball, on Instagram at Literary Canon Ball, or find us on Facebook. And if you have something to tell us that's a little more than 140 characters, you can send us an email. We'd love to get emails at literarykannonball@gmail.com. And make sure to check out our website, literarykannonball.com, where you'll find a full wrap of the show notes, lots of really exciting links, interviews and reviews of Sidewalks, and with Christina McSweeney, who was a translator, so definitely check out the show notes, and a full list of and links to our recommendations. So that's literarykannonball.com. Check it out. Awesome.
Another one done.
And another one bites the
dust.
dust.
Another one done. Another one bites the
I had a Queen weekend. Actually, that's every weekend.
Okay, that's a bye from us.
Okay.
Bye.
I love the eyebrows that you do this eyebrow thing when you pun.
It's not deliberate.
I need to like bait you into doing another pun. That's not catfishing. That's catfishing something else, isn't it? Yeah.